be attacking them and attacking them very hard. Based on the helicopter, I guess we have the right to do that.
It's now in danger of vast escalation and the most serious kind of danger. They need to go back to the table.
We need to ensure that he finishes the job, and that job is to make certain that Iran never possesses or has a nuclear capability.
If this back and forth keeps going, at some point you can't just keep doing proportionate strikes back and forth.
All right, so argument over what the United States should do now as Iran seems to keep mixing things up, particularly in the Strait of Hormuz, which it is tonight declaring is closed again. Let's bring in our panel. Fox News contributor Mark Thiessen, Fox News senior political analyst Juan Williams, and Politico White House bureau chief Dasha Burns. Mark, you've been saying for days, if not weeks, that the president needs to get back to full-scale attacks on Iran. Do you expect he's going to do that now, or are these just pinprick strikes in retaliation?
I'm not sure. They keep saying they're proportional. I don't know what proportional is for trying to kill an American. I mean, the president said that if they killed an American, that was his red line, that we would return to combat. Well, they tried to kill an American. As Trey Yingst reported, the drone landed in the middle of the Apache between the pilots, but didn't explode. So just because it malfunctioned doesn't give them a pass. We have to treat this as if they killed an American. Several Americans, because that's what they tried to do, and we have to respond in kind. And the goal should not be to get them back to the table. We've launched 13,500 strikes, and it hasn't brought them to the table in any serious way. That's a hopeless cause at this point. We have to decapitate and destroy this regime.
So, Juan, should the goal be to pummel them into submission?
It hasn't worked so far, and
well, neither is talking, apparently.
Well, the thing is, you played that series of promises where the president says constantly, we're on the precipice of making a deal. And obviously, nothing, including the fact that we had pummeled them previously, and I think several months ago we said we had just decimated their nuclear capability. So none of that has led to the deal. And with today's reports about inflation spiking, it just looks like, what is the president doing? He shouldn't sacrifice his credibility. We should trust in his word. And I think it's just getting harder to do because I have the sense that no deal is imminent here. To the contrary, it looks like there might be more violence.
Well, but he doesn't need a deal. This is the whole thing. He was at the 5-yard line.
A surrender
he was at
could
the
be the deal, right?
5-yard line. We have to just hit the targets. We've destroyed 82% of their defense industrial base. Destroy 99% of it.
So, Dasha, what's your sense of how the president's decision tree is working here?
Well, look, from the beginning, he has had a number of factions in his ear. He's had people that were sort of maximalists, like Mark here, and people that were minimalists who wanted to go the diplomacy route. And now we're in this purgatory where we're kind of doing both. We're in a ceasefire, but we're firing at each other. Just before I came on air here, I spoke with someone close to the president that has expertise in this area, and this person told me that Trump has made it clear that he wants to still keep everything below the threshold of a ceasefire, even as he acts like he's going medieval on them. So the message that people are getting is that he's posturing here, but he's not ready to go back to full-scale war, even though a lot of experts that I've been talking to do say what you say, Mark, which is that in order to regain leverage, it's going to be very difficult to do that without going harder.
So he's telegraphing to the Iranian leadership he doesn't want to go back to full-scale military action. So the Iranian leadership is just going to lead him by the nose.
Well, also the problem is if you keep saying your goal is a deal, then the Iranians have the upper hand because they can just deny you the deal and they deny you victory. You do not need a deal to have victory. As long as we meet the objectives that he set out at the start of the military campaign of destroying their ballistic missile capability, of destroying their defense industrial base, of setting back their nuclear program, and opening the strait, which he can do militarily. Apparently we've been doing quietly.
He's been so reticent to do this. He has been so reticent to go into full-scale war, to do anything near boots on the ground.
Well, he did it. He just stopped too soon.
Let me just say
we had destroyed 82% of their defense industrial base, destroyed the rest of it.
Go ahead, Juan.
And then we win.
But the point is they were able to hit the helicopter, so apparently they have some military capability. And secondly, the Strait of Hormuz has been shut. And, the problem is that, going back to what Dasha was talking about, what is the deal, if there was a deal? I know you're opposed to it, but if there was a deal that was agreeable, Do you really think that the Iranians would agree to regime change? I mean, we killed the Ayatollah, and there's no regime
And the Iranians
change.
are not sounding like they want a
all
deal.
about-
I mean, some of the posts on social media this week from Iranian leadership has been shocking, saying we can have other languages than diplomacy, saying you ride the horse you saddled.
The
I mean,
incorrigibility with them is just at a level that you can't even begin to
But even
understand. I want to swap the politics,
All
here,
right.
just because there's some great stuff to talk about.
Something less controversial.
Graham Plattner's landslide victory, 72% against Janet Mills. He was congratulated by Bernie Sanders, who was his chief supporter. Congratulations to Graham Plattner on his landslide victory in Maine. Together, we will defeat oligarchy and create an economy that works for all, not just the few. So, Juan, the Democrats threw Me Too, anti-Semitism, racism, and homophobia off the cliff for political expediency here?
I don't know about there's any doubt about it. I think the voters are the ones who made this decision, and it's overwhelming. It wasn't a close race. He beat, I think her name's Sarah Gideon, who in 2020 set a record for the Democratic primary, and he beat that. So pretty incredible performance, and the voters clearly want him. Now, I think voters want somebody who's kind of anti-authority, anti-elite. They want what they call authentic, and he's gritty and, to my mind, a little offensive, a lot. But that's clearly what the American voters want. You think about what's going on in Texas with Ken Paxton. Paxton and Plattner might win. What does that say about us and about our voters?
Where we are as a voting public. So Plattner says that his journey of redemption is complete. Donald Trump doesn't think so. Listen to both of them here.
Redemption is not just some simple or easy destination. It's a journey. I've made mistakes in my life, mistakes that I regret. If you give me the chance, I will be a senator for the people who cannot afford to buy a senator.
I watched that thug that's up in Maine. He's a thug. And they're trying to make excuses for him. I mean, he's worse than any human being that's ever run for office, probably.
I mean,
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, is his journey of redemption complete? He's still got the Nazi tattoo. It's just covered up.
Who among us hasn't put a tattoo on our body with the same symbol that Heinrich Himmler wore on his hat? I mean, these are things that people do occasionally, and we regret them. I mean, look, this is the Democrats have been telling us for the last 10 years that the Republicans are Nazis, and Donald Trump is a Nazi, and now they've actually nominated somebody with a Nazi tattoo. He's saying his journey of redemption. Until a year ago, he was on Kick, which is an app that's been described by the National Center for Sexual Exploitation as a predator's paradise. 70% of American teens are on it.
While he was married.
While he was married. So, I mean, yeah, good luck with this guy.
A lot of people think he can beat Susan Collins.
Look, there are a lot of Democrats that have not shunned Graham Plattner because they do see in him, despite all of the controversy, what they feel the Democratic Party has lost, which is the ability to connect with working class voters, to not sound like an elitist, to really do the authenticity candidacy. And there aren't a ton of figures in the party right now that are able to capture that. And they're looking at the vote totals and they're saying, you know what? Despite all of the baggage, this is what we have to deal with right now. And this guy is the best that we have in this race.
I guess when it comes to the Democrats and Graham Plattner, winning's not the thing. It's everything.
Yeah, I wonder what Janet Mills was going to do. You know, the governor who was running against him. What does she do? And Susan Collins has been so polite.
So far, that could change. We got to jump and thank folks. Appreciate it. Now this.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.